Top 20 Facilities Manager Interview Questions and Answers. When looking for a facility manager, questioning candidates offers the opportunity to assess whether they are competent, qualified, and experienced. To achieve this, it is vital to ask the right questions during the interview. Other than quizzing individuals about their work experience and character, identifying the right person for the facility management job requires more targeted questions. Asking field-specific questions will allow the interviewer to gauge how much knowledge does a candidate have concerning facility management. It is also important to have an idea of the responses to expect. In the end, the interviewer should be able to identify the most qualified candidate based on how well he or she answered the interview questions. These top 20 facility manager interview questions and answers will help you to prepare adequately for your scheduled interview. 1. What are the roles of a facility manager? The interviewer tests your understanding of the role performed by a facility manager. Tip number 1. State some roles performed by facility managers. Tip number 2. Be prompt with your answer and avoid mulling. Sample answer. A facility manager ensures effective management and maintenance of a facility. He or she makes sure that the physical infrastructure of a business is operating appropriately. Besides, he handles any emergency issues relating to the facility. Formulates future facility plans including planning for repairs and replacements. 2. What qualities should a facility manager possess? There are certain qualities that enhance the performance of a facility manager. The interviewer seeks to know whether you are aware of such qualities. Tip number 1. Provide the qualities of a good facility manager. Tip number 2. Be brief and direct to the point. Sample answer. A good facility manager should be able to communicate effectively with others including executives, employees, and contractors. Facility managers should be exceptionally diligent and conscientious since they are in charge of daily business operations. They should possess problem-solving skills to be able to identify and solve issues before they escalate. Besides, they should have time management, negotiation, and relationship-building skills as well as be proactive thinkers. 3. How does a typical day of a facility manager look like? The interviewer wants to assess whether you are conversant with the duties and activities performed by a facility manager. Tip number 1. State the tasks performed by facility managers. Tip number 2. Avoid mulling over the answer to avoid being questionable. Sample answer. A facility manager performs various tasks daily, including supervising staff across various divisions, making sure facilities are repaired, conducting proactive maintenance, and providing advice on ways to enhance facilities and reduce costs. Besides, facility managers create budgets, plan about future facilities, and oversee building projects, refurbishments, and renovations. 4. As a facility manager, how would you support the digital workplace? Here, the interviewer seeks to assess your understanding of the digital workplace and how you can support it. Tip number 1. Describe the way you would promote the digital workplace. Tip number 2. Provide the impression that you are familiar with the digital working environment. Sample answer. I would begin by making sure that every employee has the right digital tools to stay connected and become productive. I would also make sure the digital technologies facilitating business in the facility are running appropriately. 5. What major challenge did you encounter lately in your previous role? Your ability to handle challenges and difficult situations is being assessed here. Tip number 1. Describe a key challenge that you faced in your last role. Tip number 2. Explain how you addressed it. Sample answer. During my last assignment, reservation of conference rooms turned out to be a big source of frustration. Customers couldn't easily find and book available rooms. But I implemented a desk booking solution that simplified the process and made it quick and easy to know available rooms and reserve them. 6. How do you keep up with the latest trends in facility management? Every employer wants an employee who understands current trends and can bring new ideas to the organization. Tip number 1. Describe how you stay current with the latest trends in the industry. Tip number 2. be brief and go straight to the point. Sample answer: I am a member of the International Facility Management Association and participate in local meetings and seminars where current matters in the field are discussed. 7. Why do you want this job? Here, the interviewer seeks to know how you understand the position and what appeals to you most about it. Tip number 1. Describe what appeals to you most about the job. Tip number 2. Be honest with your answer. Sample answer: what excites me about this job is that it will allow me to apply facility management skills more, learn new things, and know how to deal with more complex challenges. 8. Briefly describe how you have utilized data in making informed decisions. The interviewer aims to assess your ability to gather and analyze workplace data and use it to make decisions. Tip number 1. Describe how you have collected and used data previously. Tip number 2. Demonstrate how you were able to make informed decisions. Sample answer: during my previous role, I utilized IoT sensors to gather space utilization data. The data showed that most of the private offices were used only for a few hours a day. Consequently, the offices were converted into small conference rooms, which could be reserved when needed. 9. Why should we hire you for this facility manager job? Here, the interviewer wants to hear the positive attributes that make you best suited for the job. Tip number 1. Provide 2 or 3 key positive attributes that relate to the position. Tip number 2. Be prompt and don't mull about the question. Sample answer: I am particularly dedicated to the facility management profession and can motivate my team to work productively towards a common goal. Besides, I adapt to change with ease and I learn new things quickly. 10. State 4 facility management technologies you are familiar with. Exposure to facility management technologies is becoming increasingly important, and that is exactly what the interviewer is assessing here. Tip number 1. State 4 FM technologies. Tip number 2. Give the answer without mulling. Sample answer: the FM technologies I am familiar with are Enterprise Asset Management, Computer-Aided Facilities Management, Integrated Workplace Management System, Computerized Maintenance Management System. 11. How often would you schedule landscaping maintenance? The interviewer wants to know whether you understand that regular maintenance reduces hazards that may result in premises liabilities. Tip number 1. State how often you would conduct landscaping maintenance. Tip number 2. Be brief and precise with your answer. Sample answer: I would schedule landscaping maintenance and lawn care at least once every week. Besides, I would ensure to inspect the grounds regularly for potential hazards. Doing so would minimize related risks and prevent injury lawsuits. 12. As a facility manager, which types of workers have you supervised? Facility managers are involved in supervising multiple workers, and the interviewer seeks to understand whether you have such an experience. Tip number 1. State the groups of workers you have supervised. Tip number 2. Be honest with your answer. Sample answer: during my last role, I supervised facility maintenance workers, custodial staff, and groundskeepers. Besides, I communicated regularly with suppliers and vendors who service the company equipment. 13. As a facility manager, how would you manage natural disaster preparations? Here, the interviewer seeks to know whether you understand the proper protocol for preventing natural disasters. Tip number 1. Describe how you would implement measures to prevent natural disasters. Tip number 2. Demonstrate that you can effectively prepare and prevent natural disasters. Sample answer: I would adhere to the set protocol for natural disasters based on the set regulations. Besides, I would install boundaries around the facility to lessen property damage during a disaster. Also, I would make sure all equipment is properly secured. 14. As a facility manager, what processes would you follow for employee evaluation? Facility managers assess and motivate works to maintain productivity. Thus, the interviewer seeks to know whether you are familiar with employee evaluations. Tip number 1. Describe how you would implement employee evaluations. Tip number 2. Demonstrate that you are competent in this area. Sample answer. I would conduct weekly employee evaluations to determine the strengths and shortcomings of employees. Following this, I would guide and motivate workers to improve productivity. 15. How would you manage disciplinary actions as a facility manager? The interviewer wants to know whether you can be firm when it comes to correcting employee behavior. Tip number 1. Explain how you would handle disciplinary cases. Tip number 2. Demonstrate that you can correct employee behavior. Sample answer. I would always ensure to deal with disciplinary cases in private. I would explain the issues at hand respectfully to the concerned individual and offer advice on ways to avoid the problem in the future. Disciplinary actions would include issuing warnings to employees. If an employee is warned several times without changing his or her behavior, I would not hesitate to recommend the expulsion of such a worker. 16. What is your management style as a facility manager? The interviewer is interested in knowing the style you use to manage people. Tip number 1. Describe the management style you use. Tip number 2. Ensure to be clear to facilitate ease of understanding. Sample answer. I find building a team to be an effective style in facility management. To achieve this, I make sure that each team member understands his or her role. This includes knowing where they fit well and work productively. Moreover, I believe in prompt feedback. If a worker commits a wrong, I make sure to notify them immediately to prevent further mistakes. I have discovered an increase in ineffectiveness when feedback is delayed. 17. What have you done concerning personal development in the past 12 months? The interviewer seeks to know whether you have taken any personal initiative to develop your skills concerning facility management. Tip number 1. State what you have done to enhance your skills. Tip number 2. Be brief and honest with your answer. Sample answer. I enrolled in a business administration short course at a local college. I furthered my managerial skills and gained great knowledge on teamwork and communication. I can now manage facilities and teams better. 18. How would you settle a dispute between your employees? Here, the interviewer wants to assess your problem-solving skills. Tip number 1. Describe how you would reconcile the workers. Tip number 2. Give the impression that you are a good problem solver. Sample answer. First, I would seek to know the main cause of the problem. I have discovered that workers may conflict when doing different works in the same location as each seeks to finish his or her job. Whatever the problem, I would then talk to the employees on what they should have done to avoid the dispute. This would help to prevent the reoccurrence of the issue in the future. 19. Describe an instance you made a mistake in your roles and how you handled the situation. The interviewer wants to assess whether you own your mistakes. Tip number 1. Describe the mistake that happened. Tip number 2. Show that you own your errors. Sample answer. During my last role, while supervising the cleaning of our production facility, I failed to ensure warnings of the wet and slippery floor were put up during the cleaning process. As a result, a visitor to the office slipped and fell. He later sued the company. Following this, I owned the mistake and apologized to the executives and promised that such mistakes will not occur in the future. Besides, I developed an SOP that provided instructions about the cleaning process. 20. State areas where facility managers are responsible for legal compliance. Facility management should conform to certain legal laws, and the interviewer seeks to know whether you are familiar with areas that require compliance. Tip number 1. State several areas that require legal compliance. Tip number 2. Give the impression that you comply with the set regulations. Sample answer. Some areas that require legal compliance include health and safety, labor management, ethics management, and work contracts. A breach of the laws that guide the management of these areas can attract lawsuits. Conclusion. Asking both role-specific and behavioral questions will allow you as an interviewer to assess the skillfulness of every candidate. In the end, you will be able to determine who is most qualified for the job. Thus, these top questions and answers will simplify your hiring process by enabling you to know what to ask with the responses to expect.